Overtime College Football Podcast. We're finally back after some technical difficulties that prevented us from recording for the last little bit, but we're here and we're ready to get rocking and rolling. Mr. Andy B, how are you?
I am doing fairly good. You know, I'm a college student, so pretty exhausted at the moment. Getting things back rolling from summer is always difficult, but the great thing is we have college football, so it makes up for college academics. So let's just go ahead and kick off with our biggest regret of last week. I mean, I've got to take my own foot out of my mouth. I don't know what demon possessed me and told me that Miami could keep it close to Alabama. A little part of me was hoping Bill O'Brien would have been the Bill O'Brien who was there at Houston for that last little bit, who didn't know what to do, how to do it. I mean, there's no trading in college football, so that should have been an indicator it wouldn't have been near as bad. And Bryce Young, my God, who could have guessed the freshman would have been that good in his first start after they lost the Heisman Trophy winner, and then another great receiver behind that, and then the best running back in college football, and a couple offensive linemen off of that one, and then have the best offense in college football. If you could have guessed that one, you know what? There's words that I could say to you. I would have said that you were a Bama bandwagoner, but no, you just had some superior knowledge of a quarterback who never played a game in college football. What about with you?
Well, on the Alabama point, to be fair, I don't know if anybody necessarily expected that great of a performance out of the young quarterback. I think out of all the ones that were expected to have really good performances this weekend, he beat them all out, you know, as far as Spencer Rattler, DJU goes, and he had a really great performance. He seemed really composed in the pocket, was obviously very mobile, was able to make the big throws, and really showed out in the spotlight against number 14 Miami, where I have to put.
How good is Miami, though? I will ask that question. How good is Miami? How good is the ACC?
After the performance this weekend, I think the old adage holds true that the ACC may be one of the weaker conferences in all of college football. And this is where I get to put my foot in my mouth. I predicted not only that Sam Howell would perform phenomenally this weekend, but also that Clemson would beat Georgia by a few touchdowns. As we watched, that was not the case in either game. North Carolina struggled with Virginia Tech the entire game, ended up getting beat. Essentially an upset. They were number 10, I think, right? UNC was number 10, getting beat by unranked Virginia Tech.
Sounds about right.
And Sam Howell struggled all night, missing receivers, missing throws, missing reads. Similarly, up against the UGA defensive line and back seven, DJU struggled unbelievably bad. It was like watching a high schooler, like a high school freshman, try to compete with a collegiate defense. Not only did he miss throws, he was staring down receivers, had absolutely no pocket presence, and had what seemed like cinder blocks on his feet. The kid could not run. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Now, it's not like JT Daniels for Georgia did much better, but my God, the preseason hype of DJU definitely did not show in that game. Maybe it will down the road, but as a Clemson fan, I'm kind of looking at our season and thinking it could possibly be in jeopardy if some of those issues are not straightened out moving forward.
I mean, it doesn't help that Will Shipley did not perform well and that it was arguably what's going to be one of the top defenses in the country to break in a whole new team. And Clemson's never been a team that's been maulers up front on the offensive line, as I said a few weeks ago. But the difference this time is Clemson's lacking the creativity to work around that aspect. They used to have Trevor Lawrence who could do bootlegs. They had Deshaun who can move the pocket, but DJ needed to go to a college with an offensive line to protect him, and I don't know if Clemson's the team. It could just be DJ's in the wrong system.
Yeah, I mean, he's more of a pro-style quarterback where he's not as mobile, and that definitely showed it. He's a big kid. He's 6'4", 6'5", 250 pounds, given, I think, maybe that that weight hinders him a little bit, but for sure the Clemson offensive line was a big question mark coming into the season, and they definitely showed that they're not going to be dominant up front, to say the least. And maybe some of that can improve with some cohesion, but it'll be interesting to see if they can find any offensive creativity that will help offset weaker offensive line, and if they can open up the middle of the field and such a little bit more. I mean, it was just an absolute cluster against Georgia on Saturday night.
Well, I want to go back to your point about Sam Howell, because I feel like we touched on Clemson fairly well, and there wasn't much offense for us to be able to dissect because offense was non-existent in that game.
Yeah, for sure.
So Sam Howell, I feel like he got high on his own product this offseason. He heard about how great he was, the best player on the field at all times, could just take over a game. And the first game that you see, he's missing receivers. He didn't have the little things right. I just feel like he took all of the time to try to be the fancier player instead of the Tom Brady type player who is so keyed in on the tiny things that nothing gets past him. He was so worried about making the big play that he couldn't make any play at all.
Yeah, I think he got paralyzed by analyzing, essentially. And I think also something that's worth mentioning, and I think we mentioned it in our ACC preseason preview, is that North Carolina doesn't have the two stud running backs anymore that they had last year that could help aid him and take some of the focus and pressure off of him. Now, the opposing defense, they know if they shut down the run game, they can pin their ears back and key in on him, which doesn't do him any favors because, I mean, their offensive line didn't look to be world beaters either. So he's got a lot on his plate, and the pressure definitely got the better of him.
Well, was it just me, or did Mack Brown just not look at all good? Like, even healthy good. He just looked bad.
I saw that too. He not only looked somewhat pale and almost sickly. I mean, I hope he's okay, in all regards. But yeah, he did look lost. At the end of the game, it was probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen. He was just kind of looking around like a lost puppy, and you wouldn't expect that out of Mack Brown.
He looked
especially
defeated. Just defeated is the word to describe Mack Brown. Just every bit of him looked sunken, that he wasn't enjoying it like he did last year. Even whenever he lost games last year, he still had a lively feel to him. The little part of me wonders if those same national championship aspirations that were killing him at Texas have followed him to North Carolina, and it's kind of sucking the fun out of coaching again.
That's a good possibility. I think we do also have to mention and realize reports came out that his brother died, I think, a week before that game. So in some aspects, that probably could have definitely come into play just a little bit. I couldn't imagine losing one of my loved ones that close to game time. But for North Carolina's sake and his personal sake, I hope he's able to pull out of it and get that team headed in the right direction. It is still a long season, and that Coastal Division is kind of wide open at this point. So hopefully they can get him in the right direction. If not, we may see some of those issues that plagued him at Texas continue to persist.
Possibly. So let's go ahead and move into our top 10s for this based on last week and this upcoming week. So we'll start out with my top 10. If you don't mind reading off the top 10, and I'll break down why each team is there.
All right, so I am going to our Twitter, where we graciously posted your top 10 preview a little bit early. A little sneak peek for those of y'all that follow us on Twitter at Overtime CFP. So, starting off at number 1 in Andy V's top 10 list is Alabama.
Of course, we all know why Alabama is number 1. Next, let's go on to the disputable instead of
number 2. You have Georgia.
Yes, Georgia has the best win in college football at the moment. From what we know of Clemson in the past, Clemson is a good team. So until Clemson proves us wrong and says they're a bad team, I'm going to base a little bit of what last season and seasons past have to say. And I say that that is a damn good win. Quality opponent, hostile environment where your defense took over and made the plays. So Georgia at the moment is the number 2 team.
Rolling on to number 3, you have Ohio State.
Yes, Ohio State, they started off slow against a quality Power 5 opponent. It happens. They're replacing arguably one of the top quarterbacks in college football last season. And it took them a little bit of time. But after that, you saw them rolling, going, and having pretty good time. So, as much as I don't like Ohio State, I'm not going to argue that they need to be dethroned in such a manner instead of just having a slow start. Next up.
Number 4, Texas A&M.
Yeah, so A&M, good team. They had a quality win. I'm going a little bit off preseason here. They didn't face a world beater in the first game, so they did what you expected. I'm not going to bump them for doing the expected.
Coming in at number 5 is Notre Dame.
Yeah, so Notre Dame, I have at number 5. They were playing in a hostile environment on the road. I think we're, number 1, overlooking it from previous seasons. They are what looked to be a much improved team. The defensive line for Florida State will wreak havoc in the ACC this entire season. There's not an offensive line that can contain the talent they are displaying, and at least at the top part of their rotation. Then they were also commemorating Bobby Bowden and paying respect to the coach that built Florida State. So that was, of course, an emotional night on a home opener after a pandemic. So that team's going to have a lot of fight in them. Notre Dame is definitely not the best team. They have flaws, as we saw. They tried to get too cute on offense at times. Lack of creativity. Quarterback went to his first read 90% of the time. His number 1 receiver happened to be open a lot of the time, but sometimes it was drops. Notre Dame has a lot of stuff to tighten up. And on defense, a lot of the first big runs and big plays happen against the second part of the rotation. So rotation needs some work. And then past that, I don't understand the 3 deep that out of the 3 down linemen they were running. But we'll see how it works against Toledo this week.
I do have to ask, is Notre Dame still your somewhat of your dark horse for the national championship contender, or do you think possibly
No, I think
they've slipped a little bit?
As long as they tighten things up, they have the talent to do it. But I don't know if anyone's going to dethrone Alabama. It looks borderline impossible to do.
Alabama does look like a juggernaut right now, as we have seen them in previous seasons. So, rolling on to number 6, a little bit of a shakeup compared to the AP.
So Oklahoma.
Is Oklahoma.
There's a little bit of argument from I know I'll get that. Why do you have Notre Dame, who struggled against a Power 5 opponent, knocking Oklahoma this far, and might be a more talented Oklahoma team this far? It's because Oklahoma performed poorly on defense. The one knock we've had on them for multiple years is that their defense is not championship caliber, and you couldn't stop Tulane. Then you add into the fact they were at home. Yes, Tulane was playing emotionally from Ida, but so was Florida State from Bobby Bowden. So there are 2 emotional aspects, but Florida State was the home team. Notre Dame was on the road. Notre Dame beat them. Then you have Oklahoma at home not being able to hold off a Tulane team. So similar situations where both teams let each other down, let their fans down, but one happened on the road and one happened at home.
Fair enough. So
Yeah,
number 7,
Cincinnati,
you have the Cincinnati Bearcats.
Quarterback had a great game. I just want to see them beat a couple more, at least one big team before I pop them up higher. Yeah, Iowa
All right.
had
Number
a
8
great
is
game.
Iowa.
I can't remember who they played. I remember watching a little bit of the game. They're dominant up front as they always are. They run the ball well, and they have a big game against Iowa State this week. So I think that Iowa can put themselves in a nice position for the rest of the season. Oh, it was Indiana that they beat. There we go. They dominated Indiana up front.
And they had a pretty dominant defensive performance in that one too, didn't they? They had quite a few
they made
interceptions. It
Penix
wasn't
exactly
a game I
who
was
Penix
keyed in
was,
on.
which is
but
he's an athletic quarterback, but he's not the best passer. He's a good enough passer. And he's a fantastic athlete, but they made him into a passer and just didn't work for Penix.
yeah, so coming in
UCLA,
at number 9
my
is
dark
UCLA.
horse for the Pac-12. So this one was a toss-up for me between Oregon and UCLA. Right now, UCLA has the higher quality of a win. Oregon kind of struggled a little bit week 1. I think they were more looking ahead to Ohio State than it being an actual poorly coached team type struggle. So I think that this one could easily change out next week, and you could see Oregon and UCLA possibly in this top 10. But UCLA has the higher quality win, and they were dominant up front against LSU. They controlled the trenches against an SEC team. Make your comments about said SEC team, but they still dominated an SEC team up front, and I think that does not need to be overlooked or understated.
And then
Yeah,
rounding
Penn
out
State,
your top 10
they
is Penn State.
had a great game against Wisconsin. Wisconsin could be a terrible team, and this could be wrong. I'm going off of what I saw, though. Wisconsin looked like a decent team that couldn't get into the end zone because Penn State would tighten it up in a bend but don't break style. Graham Mertz threw costly interceptions throughout the game. So there weren't many quality wins throughout the week, and this just happened to be one of the games that was in a prime slot for watching, and it showed you that Penn State is a good team, a talented team that's able to beat up on and control the trenches with a Wisconsin-type team. They were able to big boy football Wisconsin, which doesn't happen often.
Yeah, that's not an easy task. All right, so I guess switching over, we'll run through my top 10 right quickly. I'm not going to spend too much time on the ones that are the same as yours. Obviously, number 1, we got Alabama coming in. Like we said, juggernaut. Don't see any holes in their performance right now. And looking at their schedule, I expect them to continue to perform at the same high rate. Number 2, we've got UGA. You have to put them there. Like you said, beat a quality opponent in Clemson, or what we think is one, and showed a very dominant defense. The offense needs some work, but we can assume they will only improve as their starters return back from injury as the season progresses. Number 3, we have an interesting switch up. I have UCLA at number 3, given I have not been high on LSU, as can be seen from our Twitter and other previous podcasts, but UCLA was dominant, and I really liked their run game and their defense as a whole. And looking at them, I think they can pretty much compete with anybody in the top 10, or at least give them a good run for their money. So I put them at 3, give them a little bit benefit of the doubt going into this week. Number 4, we have OU. I had to drop them down given they did win, but like you said, Tulane gave them everything they had and then maybe a little bit more. Had the game been a few more minutes, we may have seen a little upset there. Number 5, I have Notre Dame. Like you said, Notre Dame went into a hostile environment at Florida State, had to fight tooth and nail. It was a great game. Love watching it as a fan. I think they have a couple of things to figure out on both sides of the ball, but for this week, they're in my number 5 slot. Moving on to number 6, I put Clemson at number 6, given the opponent they played, the quality of opponent in Georgia. The offense did not score, only one field goal, but Clemson's defense is dominant enough to be a 12-0 team. It's just whether or not the offense figures it out, which the jury's out on that one. Number 7, we have Texas A&M. I rank them at number 7, because they had an okay win last week, but they got to prove it to me, just based off of previous history and seeing how that team can somewhat fall apart at times. Number 8, Cincinnati, really no change. I just want to see them beat a quality opponent, like you said. I want to see them go up against a big boy. Number 9, I have Iowa. Like we discussed, they seem to be able to run the ball really well. Pretty much just a complete team, and I expect them to at least move up a few more spots in the poll going forward. And at number 10, Penn State. It's never easy to play Wisconsin. They've got a really big line. They generally play pretty sound defense, and they're a tough win. They're never an easy out. So Penn State gets the nod.
I have
at
a question
10 for me.
From your watching of this last weekend, give me an offensive and defensive MVP. Offensive, not named Bryce Young, because we're both going to agree on that one.
Defensive MVP, as much as I hate to say it, I don't know his name, but it's number 17 from the Georgia defense. He gave Clemson problems all night, racked up multiple sacks, was pressuring the quarterback, flying all over the field. So he gets my nod for defensive MVP of the week. As far as offensive MVP, I mean, his team didn't win the game, but if you don't give the nod to McKenzie Milton, who broke his leg and was thought to never walk again and or never play the game of football, and coming out and leading Florida State to an overtime loss against Notre Dame. I mean, what do you're not a college football fan, so he gets the nod.
Same question applies for me. I like Michigan State's running back. I don't know his name. He had 268 yards against Northwestern. I think 4 touchdowns. It's incredible for a running back. So that's going to be interesting to see him play this week. I think that if he continues this pace, I don't care if your team wins or loses. If you're racking up that many yards, you need to be in some Heisman contention. And defensive, called me a homer, but Kyle Hamilton. Oh, man, those first interception any defender should have made. That second interception was special. 30-yard chase down for that pick. Oh, he wanted that alone.
He was a hell of a ball player this weekend and a big part in that Notre Dame win. I haven't seen a defensive secondary guy that athletic in quite a few years, and I'm excited to see what he does the rest of the season. While we're on this, I guess I want to ask you at the same time, being that we both had to put our foot in our mouths with some of our takes last week, who was the biggest disappointment for you this weekend?
I'm just going to say the ACC.
Football?
So they didn't really put up a fight besides the Florida State team. Ole Miss just outclassed every bit of Louisville. Sorry for all you homers out there. But then you had Clemson get embarrassed by Georgia, but Georgia's offense got embarrassed by Clemson. So what are North Carolina, their top 10 team, embarrassed by Virginia Tech. Who knows? Virginia Tech might be a good team. And then Miami was completely run out of the house by Alabama. I mean, it's Alabama, but come on. Make it at least entertaining. And the ACC was just pathetic this first week of football. I highly doubt the ACC will put a team into the playoff this season. I think the Pac-12 will fill that void, and then possibly Cincinnati could fill that void also. But I think it'll be someone from the Pac-12, mainly being UCLA, because ESPN's got to make sure they get their 2 SEC teams in per year.
Yeah, on a similar note, I think the biggest disappointment for me this weekend was just ACC quarterbacks in general. Sam Howell, De'Aaron King, DJ Uiagalelei all failed to meet expectations, especially preseason hype. And their performance was part of the reason that their team lost. I'm not going to place it all on them, but a good bit of blame does go to them, especially crumbling in these big pressure moments against Alabama, Virginia Tech, and Georgia. So pick it up, boys. Let's see if you can do any better this week and the rest of the season moving forward. But for right now,
all right, let me go ahead and
y'all are
make
my biggest
a
losers of the week.
surprise switch for my Big 12 champion for the season. I don't think it's going to be Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's has a few too many holes on defense. Go ahead and give me the Texas Tech Red Raiders to win it all this season in the Big 12. Guess what? The first half, they started off slow again because guess what? I wasn't watching Clemson, Georgia like most people. That game was boring. I wanted to watch some fun football. I turned on Houston, Texas Tech. And I watched the Texas Tech team in the second half get it together and dominate a Houston team. So tell me how I'm not supposed to be excited about that Texas Tech team, because Houston's not a bad team. Oh, Texas is back though. Yeah, horns down, bro. Number one, Sark will find a way to choke this away like always. I know you've had a revelation about Sark, but I don't think he's going to take Texas to the top this season. It is TTU for the Big 12 championship.
I like it. I hope a new champion is crowned. I guess my hot take of the week is that we will see what I presume to be the Pac-12 champion, Oregon, boat race OSU this weekend. You heard me. Ohio State didn't impress me. They're going to get beat by Oregon by at least 2 scores. I may be eating crow come next week.
Yeah, I think Troubadour's out, though.
Go
Their
Ducks,
best defensive
baby.
player for Oregon.
7 points.
I will have a contrary opinion that
let's make it a good game.
Is it at Oregon or is it at Ohio? Is it at the Horseshoe, Ohio State?
I want to say it's at the Horseshoe. I'm not 100%.
Look that one up for me because I
one,
think it's at
being
Oregon.
honest.
And if it's at Oregon, I'm going with the home team. But here's where I will differ. This will be a slugfest. Under 60 points. I might dare to even say under 50 points scored combined between both teams. So I think final score, we could be looking 25-30 type score, contrary to what everyone else thinks. I think we have 2 great defenses and a little bit of inexperience on offense for both teams. I think it's going to be a ball control type game.
Well, your take might be correct. It is at the Horseshoe. So
yep.
a little bit of
I'm going to give the home
advantage
field
there
advantage
for
to
OSU.
OSU, but I would not be surprised if Oregon came away with an upset. Whoever controls the ball, whoever holds the ball for the most time in this game will win. There's not a doubt in my mind about that stat. Watch ball control. Whoever holds it the longest wins it.
My other hot week is we all know that Coastal Carolina University, my pick for Dark Horse NYC Bowl champion, is playing Kansas this upcoming week at their stadium. Kansas secured their first win last weekend for the first time since 2019. Students rushed the field. They got to break out some arguably terrible-looking uniforms, and they're going to clash on the teal blue field. I do believe that we will see Coastal Carolina easily dispatch them. I think the line's at 25.5 in Coastal's favor right now, but I think we may see them beat them by at least 28 points.
Go ahead and give me
Let's go,
the Chanticleers, but give me them by 12. I think it's less. It is less than 2 touchdowns.
By 12. That's it's probably a more realistic depiction of what may go on, but. Moving on, other big games on the slate this week is the battle for Iowa State versus Iowa. Who do you think comes out on top in that one?
I pay attention to the line play. Both lines have the opportunity to be dominant. If we're going to go strictly off of what happened last week, then I would be crazy not to pick Iowa, because Iowa State, they struggled with a Division III team. Northern Iowa. Then you had Iowa out there just killing Indiana, top 20 team. A lot of people's dark horse to win the Big 12 this year. Bye-bye to that pick. But a little part of me just says that Matt Campbell at Iowa State is going to pull off the magic to upset Iowa. And my top 10 could be changing next week. So go Cyclones.
Yeah, I personally like Iowa favored in this game. I think they will be the ones to pull it out. But at the same time, I can see this being a low-scoring matchup, and each team getting their teeth kicked in till the very end. I think there's somewhat of a storied history between these two teams of having lower score and knuckle-knocking games. So I'm excited to watch it. It'll be on my radar this weekend for sure, but I'm going with the Cyclones, baby.
I have one observation that popped into my mind from watching the Louisville Ole Miss game yesterday. There's 2 chances for Alabama to be dethroned this year. And I don't think Alabama will finish this season undefeated again. I think someone will trip them up, and I think that someone will not be Georgia. That someone will be Ole Miss. Lane Train Kiffin will beat Alabama this season.
I can somewhat agree with that. I think we know that Lane can run a potent offense. And the defense looks improved, given it was Louisville. So we don't know how well they have improved. But historically speaking, Ole Miss has been the team to knock Nick Saban off a couple times in his career. And I think the old Lane train has finally assembled the tools to do that.
Enough about how much Lane does not like Nick. He wants to win the SEC East, not to win it, but to see Nick Saban lose it.
Yeah, there is some bad blood between those two, and I think Kiffin has almost had him a couple times.
He almost had him last year.
In the past, there's been
that was a close game. That was probably the closest game Alabama had all season last year. Was the Lane train.
Yeah, I think everybody will have that game circled moving forward. I guess to talk about maybe a much, much, much weaker team in the SEC, and that would be USC versus Eastern Carolina University. Eastern Carolina, from what I've seen, was favored by 2 points. How do we feel about that? I don't know how I feel
about South Carolina. They haven't played anyone under the Beamer coaching yet. So anyone can look great against an FCS opponent. It's actually really hard to look bad in front of an FCS opponent. A lot of teams do it though. South Carolina, they did the good thing. They managed not to look bad in front of it as playing an FCS opponent. So kudos to Shane Beamer on that one. Their Super Bowl was against Eastern Illinois. Now let's step it up a notch and go to Eastern Carolina. That looks a lot heavier of a task. South Carolina is still a team that, under Muschamp, they accrued talent. They just did not utilize that talent. So I want to see how Shane Beamer does against Eastern Carolina. I'm going to go with talent wins the game, South Carolina by a field goal.
I think that's pretty accurate. I'm not entirely sure if Luke Doty's going to be back this week. I know there was some rumors circulating around regarding his injury, given I think the graduate assistant switch to quarterback. I think he performed admirably last week, given yet again it was against an inferior opponent, and they basically just out-talented them for all the points they got. So I can see this being a close game. Honestly, I like the line. I like the upset line of ECU. But I'm going to have to go with the team that probably has more talent. So I'm going to go Carolina by 7.
Sorry, allergies, not COVID. So one thing I will say, I don't think South Carolina will win many games in the SEC. I think their slugfest of the year will be against Vanderbilt, and they'll easily end up dismembering Vanderbilt in the second half. But I think South Carolina's kind of a bottom-of-the-barrel SEC team. I put them there with Vanderbilt, and Missouri, and now LSU. Congratulations. You're there with a national champion, South Carolina, but I don't know if it's the list of national championships you want to be with.
Yeah, I tend to agree. In preseason, I said they may win as few as 2 games. Looking at their schedule a little bit closer, I think 4 wins this year for them is a good year. Given I've had a lot of Carolina fans hate on me for that personally. They think they're a little bit better than that. Some of them after the win last week think they deserve to be ranked. I don't see it. I think yet again, given it's the first year of the Beamer dynasty, as they like to call it, 4 wins is about as good as you're going to get. Maybe year 2 you'll give 6-6 and get to a bowl, but there's a lot of rebuilding to be done after Will Muschamp essentially caused that program to implode for many years. So the last game I guess we need to cover in the slate of games this weekend that interest us is the old Fighting Sarkeesians versus the old Woo Pigs of Arkansas. How you feeling about that one?
Everyone's saying that old Suey will pull off the upset and beat Texas. I think that's a well-coached Arkansas team. I think that Arkansas team does not have the talent that Texas does. And let's not go ahead and deny the fact Sarkisian is a offensive mastermind. He is probably, arguably, one of the smartest offensive coaches in college football. Fight me, don't at me. But the thing is, I think it'll be a slugfest where Texas pulls out in the fourth quarter and makes it a 2-score game. I don't think Arkansas has the weapons to compete at an offensive level. I think that it will be similar to the Notre Dame-Alabama game from last season, to where Arkansas is going to hold the ball, try to control it. They're going to move the ball methodically. Texas won't stop them from scoring many times, so stop them enough, though. Every time Texas will get the ball, they will pretty much score. And as much as Arkansas wants to control the ball, eventually they'll start having to pass and they'll get out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, I think what interests me about that game is that Sam Pittman is an offensive guy as well, but more focused on the offensive line. I think Arkansas's plan going into this game, I think they know that they're somewhat out-talented. They're going up against, sadly, an offensive coordinator that's a juggernaut, Steve Sarkisian. I think their goal will be to slow down the game as much as possible and use that offensive line to somewhat tire out the Texas defense and limit the possessions that Texas gets. Because like you said, Texas is more than likely probably going to score about every time they have the ball. Sarkisian does a really, really good job of drawing up creative plays to scheme guys open no matter what the defense might throw at them. So I think Arkansas's best path to a potential upset is to slow down the game, limit possessions, and just pound the rock. I think
one thing that we need to pay attention to with this game, it's not time of possession. It's turnovers. If Texas turns the ball over more than one time, Arkansas will win the game. If Arkansas turns the ball over at all, Texas will win the game.
Yeah, I agree with that. Turnovers will be the key
factor. So,
do
you have anything that you want to close out the podcast with? Any hot takes, cold takes, any observations that you want to put out there?
I think I pretty much got that all out of my tank for this podcast. I would like to extend a thank you to those that have helped grow us tremendously on Twitter in the short time we've been on there. I think we're up to almost 30 followers now. Thanks, folks. We really appreciate you investing in us and taking the time to listen to us and our good takes, our not so good takes, and telling us when they're just absolute shit. So we appreciate that. As always, if you're tuning into this on YouTube, you can feel free to follow us at Overtime CFP on Twitter. You can email us at overtime, CFP@gmail.com. And we appreciate you tuning in, and we look forward, or at least I look forward to this weekend's slate of games.
One last thing before I go, I'm going to give a Notre Dame observation. So number one, Notre Dame has lost 2 wide receivers this week. Lawrence Keys III is transferring from the program, will sit out the remainder of the season to preserve a year of eligibility. And Xavier Watts is switching positions from wide receiver to safety. So that puts Notre Dame in an extremely stressful situation at wide receiver, numbers-wise, on an offense that was planned around spreading the field. That will start to be concerning whenever the offensive line will get pushed around by multiple teams. This is not a good Notre Dame offensive line. I'll go fight anyone who says otherwise. It's not a good line. I think this is going to be what trips Notre Dame up this season. So I think that'll be what to watch for. Go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. Once again, as I will say, we are biased because we are fans, but we try to give as unbiased of a look as we can. If you guys have any suggestions, go ahead and hit us up. Once again, like and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter for some of our spicier takes. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully we will see you guys on Sunday.